You did not land here by accident. You arrived because a door, long hidden, has finally begun to open within you. And I need you to feel this deeply, because for so long, you've been caught in a cycle of endless wanting. Wanting change, wanting freedom, wanting clarity. That wanting became its own loop, a cage of longing that never asked you to move, only to imagine. But there comes a point when wanting collapses under its own weight. That moment when the hunger to break free becomes louder than the comfort of staying the same. And it is not gentle. It presses against you like a cocoon grown too tight, whispering that the fear of flight is still less suffocating than the safety of staying bound. This is readiness, not the polished confidence you thought would arrive one day. Not a perfect alignment of circumstances, but the raw, trembling realization that the pain of waiting has finally become unbearable. And yet, in this trembling, something holy is born. Readiness rarely announces itself with fireworks or grand declarations. It comes disguised as exhaustion, the bone-deep tiredness of carrying masks that no longer fit. It comes as surrender, the soft voice inside saying simply, "Enough." And from that whisper, everything shifts. The fog thins, the anchors snap, and for the first time you glimpse the vast expanse of possibility shimmering around you. Not as fantasy, not as theory, but as a living field. Already here, waiting to respond to the signal you send. Friend, that signal is not built on words or dreams. It is built on the choices you begin to make right now, in this very breath. You are no longer a seeker of signs. You are the sign. You are the observer, the signal, the magnet. And the moment you claim that, the universe has no choice but to move. So consider this your initiation, not someday, not when you are sure, not when all doubts are gone, but here, in this fragile, holy now. The whisper of enough becomes a bridge, carrying you out of the cocoon's tightness and into a more dangerous territory, the divide between wanting and readiness. This crossing matters more than people realize, because on the surface both states look deceptively similar. Both are filled with visions, longings, prayers for a brighter life. Both hold language of change and growth. Yet peel back the layers and you'll see wanting and readiness are not siblings. They are opposites that lead to entirely different timelines. Wanting is the softer path. Wrapped in comforting illusion, it's safe, almost indulgent. To want is to stand at the shoreline, dreaming of distant lands but refusing to untie the anchor. You imagine the golden horizons, you speak about them to others, you even rehearse how it might feel to arrive, but the boat never leaves. Wanting is addictive because it provides a sensation of movement while keeping you perfectly still. It's like watching a film of your own future rather than inhabiting it. The drama plays, the music swells, but the credits roll without you ever stepping on stage. Readiness, however, burns with an altogether different flame. It is jagged, messy, alive with risk. It demands a price. When you are truly ready, the safety of the shore no longer satisfies. You find yourself untying the anchor even while your hands shake. Readiness says, "I may not know the outcome, but still, I move." It doesn't require flawless maps or perfect certainty. It requires willingness to sail by instinct, trusting that the stars reveal themselves only once you are already adrift on the waters. Here lies the great paradox wanting often disguises itself as patience. You say, "I'll wait until I'm stronger, until the timing is perfect, until I'm wiser." But the longer you wait, the more your signal dissolves into static. Wanting sends out a pulse of absence. It declares to the quantum field, "I do not yet have it. I cannot yet be it." And the field, responsive as it is, mirrors that vibration back. Lack in, lack out. Readiness, by contrast, carries a steady coherence. even if your resources seem incomplete. The signal it emits is unbroken. Readiness doesn't beg or postpone it. Declare when you act before certainty, you broadcast trust. When you risk embarrassment, failure, or discomfort, you show the field that you are serious. The universe bends toward seriousness, cloaked in courage far faster than it bends toward endless wishing. Think of all the times you postponed action under the noble name of preparation, another book, another workshop, another list scribbled in the margins of notebooks. Waiting for one more sign, one more moment of clarity, and yet nothing shifted. The wheel of wanting kept spinning, smooth but circular, always promising, never delivering. Readiness, however, doesn't care if the ink smudges. It dials the number. It sends the email. It opens its mouth and speaks the truth, trembling. That trembling itself becomes coherence, because coherence is not perfection, it is alignment between intention, body, and action, wanting lives in the future tense. One day I will. Readiness lives in the present tense. This is who I am, and this is what I choose. Life itself bends toward the present. The quantum field answers signals anchored in known, not deferred possibilities that evaporate like mist. Wanting builds castles in tomorrow's sky. Readiness lays one imperfect stone today, and suddenly the entire architecture of destiny begins to assemble around it. The subtle trap is this wanting feels good, and so we mistake it for progress. It offers the sweet illusion that because we dream vividly, change is near. But no dream, no matter how vivid, collapses probability into reality. Only readiness does that. Readiness says, I will risk being misunderstood. I will risk failing publicly. I will risk leaving comfort behind. And because of that willingness, doorways that never existed before suddenly appear. So ask yourself how many of your desires are still locked in the wanting loop, and how many are pulsing with readiness, which longings are simply mental rehearsals, and which are alive in your body, itching for you to move. If you listen closely, you'll know. The wanting dreams will comfort you, but never scare you. The readiness impulses will terrify you and exhilarate you all at once. That is how you know the difference. The moment you cross this line, your life rearranges. The field stops mirroring lack and begins responding to presence. You become less a dreamer and more a signal, less a beggar at the gate and more the gate itself opening. Wanting talks, readiness acts. And the universe listens not to words, but to signals carved into the living present. The difference between wanting and readiness leaves behind a sharp echo, the echo of time. Because every moment you linger in wanting, you pay a price that is invisible at first, but devastating in its accumulation. Delay looks harmless, even reasonable, but delay is the most subtle thief of destiny. Think about it. How many times have you told yourself, I'll begin when I'm more prepared? How often have you waited for the perfect signal, the green light, the seamless alignment of circumstances? And yet, that perfection never arrives. Instead, opportunities slip by, quiet as shadows at dusk. Synchronicities that were knocking at your door turn away, seeking someone else who was brave enough to answer. Here's the quantum paradox. The field does not reward hesitation. In physics, an unobserved possibility remains a wave never collapsing into form. The moment of observation, the moment of choice, is what pulls a reality out of the sea of probabilities. When you delay, when you hesitate, you remain in the limbo of endless waveforms. Life never solidifies because you never send a coherent instruction. And this delay has consequences beyond the missed chances. It erodes your trust in yourself. Each time you silence the impulse to act, you teach your nervous system that you cannot be counted on. You train your body to doubt its own intuition. And over time, that doubt becomes heavier than any external obstacle. Consider how often people wait for clarity before moving. They say, "When I'm sure, I'll take the leap." But here's the truth. Clarity is the child of movement, not its parent. You do not wait to see the whole path before stepping forward. The stepping forward is what reveals the path. Like a lantern in the forest, the light expands only as you keep walking. Delay also generates static in the field. Instead of a clear signal, you emit contradictions. "I want this, but I'm not ready." The field responds with noise. That's why cycles repeat, relationships recycle, jobs feel stagnant. Not because life is cruel, but because the signal never shifted. Delay is like standing at a doorway, hand on the knob, and refusing to turn it. You are neither inside nor outside, caught in the half-life of hesitation. And yet, there is something holy about realizing the cost of your waiting. It jolts you awake. You begin to see how the years of postponement were not wasted, but training each delay, showing you what it feels like to deny your readiness. Each missed chance sharpening the ache of unexpressed potential. That ache becomes fuel. If you let it, imagine for a moment the alternate versions of you, the ones who did not delay. The you who said yes to the invitation. The you who began the work despite trembling. The you who trusted the whisper instead of waiting for proof. Those versions still exist in the quantum field. They are not lost. They are waiting for you to merge with them, waiting for you to stop lingering at the edge and finally step across. The hidden cost of delay is not just lost time, it is lost alignment. But alignment is always recoverable. The moment you declare readiness, even after years of hesitation, the field responds as though no time was wasted. It does not punish, it recalibrates instantly. The only real cost of delay is the version of yourself you never get to meet if you never choose. So let this realization settle in. Every time you delay, you postpone not just an outcome, but your own becoming. And every time you act, even clumsily, you reclaim that timeline. Delay keeps you circling. Readiness collapses the circle into a path, and the path, though uncertain, is the only way forward. The hidden cost of delay often leaves you staring at a barren horizon, and it is here that another stage of the journey begins, the desert of the unknown. This desert is not made of sand and sun, but of silence, emptiness, and the unsettling absence of your old landmarks. It's the place you step into when you finally cut ties with delay, but have not yet discovered what comes next. At first, the desert feels cruel. The comforts you leaned on vanish. The people who once nodded at your old identity begin to pull away. Habits that distracted you stop working. Even your own excuses sound hollow, as if your voice no longer believes the lies it repeats. You look around and see only vast space. No road signs, no clear path, just a horizon that seems to stretch without end. And in that emptiness, fear rises. Maybe you've made a mistake. Maybe you should turn back. But here's the secret that few will tell you. The desert is not punishment. The desert is purification. It is the vacuum that clears out everything mismatched with who you are becoming. Nature itself abhors a vacuum, which is why this space is so necessary by creating emptiness. You prepare the field for what is truly aligned to enter. Without this stripping away, the new cannot arrive. Think of it like an operating system being rewritten. Old programs must be uninstalled, even if they once served you, so the new code can run without corruption. This uninstalling feels like loss. It feels like exile, but beneath the loss is expansion. Each grain of silence is an opening through which possibility can pour. The desert also reveals the parts of you that were hidden beneath the noise. In the absence of external distractions, your inner voice grows louder. The self you once ignored begins to rise, whispering truths you cannot dismiss. It can feel like loneliness, but it is not the loneliness of abandonment. It is the loneliness of birthing a new identity, one that no one else can walk for you. And yes, this desert tests you. It demands that you sit with uncertainty. It asks if you can survive without the familiar crutches. Most people cannot, and so they turn back. They retreat to the life they once called good enough, because the discomfort of not knowing feels worse than the dissatisfaction they escaped. But those who endure, those who stay in the desert long enough to let the silence work on them, emerge transformed. In spiritual traditions, deserts are where prophets went to hear the voice of the divine. In science, vacuums are where particles reveal their most mysterious behaviors. In your life, the desert is where the illusions fall away, and only the real remains. You may not recognize yourself in the mirror during this phase, but that is because the mask is being peeled back to reveal the one you've always been. This stage cannot be skipped. You cannot leap from old self to new self without crossing the barren middle, but you can change how you see it. Instead of cursing the desert, you can honor it. Instead of fearing emptiness, you can trust that the silence is fertile. Beneath the surface, unseen roots are weaving, preparing the soil for growth. And when you finally emerge from this desert, you carry with you a resilience that no book, no affirmation, no easy success could ever teach. The emptiness you survived becomes the space in which you can hold the abundance to come. The desert of the unknown is not your enemy. It is your initiation. And though it feels like absence, it is presence of the highest order, the presence of possibility waiting to be born through you. From the desert's silence, another truth emerges. The void you just walked through was never empty. It was tuning you, stripping away static until your signal could finally be heard. Because at the heart of all this, your life is less about effort and more about resonance. What you send out shapes what you draw in. But here's the mistake most people make. They confuse noise for clarity. Think of it this way. Every human being broadcasts, not with towers or satellites, but with thought, feeling, and embodied presence. Wanting emits one kind of signal, a scattered hum that whispers, someday, maybe. Readiness, on the other hand, sends a sharp, coherent tone that the universe cannot ignore. But clarity is fragile. It is disrupted the moment doubt overlays belief. The moment you act from fear while affirming faith with your lips. That contradiction produces nothing but static. So what does a clear signal look like? Imagine a tuning fork. Strike it. And its vibration doesn't just exist in isolation. It resonates with anything built to the same frequency. A nearby tuning fork will begin to sing without being touched. Your life works exactly the same. When your inner state hums with coherence, opportunities built on that same resonance begin to vibrate toward you. This is why magnets make such a potent metaphor. A magnet doesn't chase the metal, it simply holds its field steady, and the unseen force does the work. Contrast that with the exhausted struggle of chasing, forcing, or faking a signal you don't yet embody. One path drains you, the other aligns you. And coherence is not a mystical riddle, it is practical. A clear signal arises when thought, feeling, and action line up. If you affirm abundance but act from fear of lack, the frequency collapses into noise. If you visualize health while secretly clinging to the identity of being broken, the static overwhelms the tone. But when you say, I trust, feel the trust, and choose as if trust is real, then the signal rings out like a bell across the field of possibility. This is why surrender is as important as intention. Forcing sends the message, I don't believe. Surrender, by contrast, declares, I trust the resonance to do its work. It doesn't mean passivity, it means choosing, aligning, and then letting the field respond without clutching for proof. Think back to moments in your own life when things came effortlessly, a chance meeting, a sudden insight, a door opening without struggle. Those weren't accidents. They were signals received. You weren't pushing. You weren't desperate. You were in tune. That ease was coherence in action. So the challenge becomes less about how hard you push and more about how cleanly you tune. Strip away the contradictions. Soften the static of fear. Replace the desperate chasing with the quiet steadiness of alignment. Your life doesn't need louder demands. It needs a purer tone. And remember, the field is impartial. It does not reward wishing nor punish failure. It simply amplifies the clearest frequency it receives. The question is, what are you broadcasting now? Is it longing disguised as faith, or is it readiness humming with coherence? Because when your signal is steady, the world doesn't just notice. It shifts. Doors open. People appear. Timelines collapse toward you not because you forced them, but because resonance made them inevitable. Still resonating with the image of the tuning fork. We must now turn to a deeper truth. Your signal cannot be shaped by words alone. Affirmations spoken without embodiment are like notes played on a muted instrument. Sound is produced, but no resonance travels. And so many seekers stay trapped in this loop. They repeat, they chant, they visualize, yet their lives remain unchanged. Why? Because the body is unconvinced. Consider this, your nervous system is the real transmitter. Every cell carries memory of trauma, of triumph, of fear, of freedom. You can tell yourself, I am safe. But if your shoulders are tight, your breath shallow, and your stomach clenched, the signal you broadcast is not safety. It is tension. And the field, ever responsive, echoes back what your body truly carries, not what your lips rehearse. Embodiment, then, is the missing key. It is not about shouting affirmations into the void, but allowing your flesh, your heartbeat, your breath, to become the resonance chamber of truth. When thought, feeling, and physical posture align, coherence is born. Imagine someone declaring confidence while shrinking inward. No one believes it, not even the universe. Now imagine the same words spoken from a grounded stance, with calm breath and steady gaze. Instantly, the signal is different. The message lands. Your body is always speaking before your mouth does. That's why rituals of embodiment matter. Morning breathwork, for instance, is not just a wellness trend. It is quantum calibration. 5 deep breaths before touching your phone. Each one clearing static. Each one asking, what frequency do I choose today? Abundance or lack, trust or fear, control or flow, the answer does not live in your head alone. It shows up in your pulse, in your shoulders, in the way your feet touch the ground. Even small acts become declarations when infused with embodiment. Choosing nourishing food when your body craves escape. Moving your limbs with awareness instead of dragging them through routine. Speaking truth with steady tone instead of shrinking into apology. Each act tells the field, I am the one who already carries what I seek. And here lies the paradox. Embodiment often feels awkward at first. You may feel like an actor and pretending, but this is no different from striking a chord on an untuned guitar. The sound may wobble, yet with each adjustment, resonance strengthens. Practice does not make perfection. Practice creates coherence. Science gives us a clue here as well. Neural pathways strengthen through repetition. Muscles adapt to the demands placed upon them. The same principle applies energetically. Your body learns the frequency you rehearse. It doesn't matter if you begin clumsily. What matters is consistency. With time, the act becomes authentic. The signal becomes second nature. So be wary of affirmations that live only on paper or in air. They may inspire, but they rarely transform. Embodiment is the alchemy that translates vision into vibration. It is what turns I want into I am. Ask yourself now, how would the version of me who already lives in my desired reality breathe, walk, sit? What choices would that body make today? And then, rather than simply imagining it, practice it. Move as if it were true. Because in the quantum field, acting as though is not make-believe, it is how timelines collapse into now. The universe doesn't respond to repetition of phrases. It responds to coherence of being. An embodiment is how you become the very frequency you once begged for. From the act of embodiment arises the next layer of initiation, subtle but unavoidable, the silent tests of readiness. These tests do not arrive wrapped in ceremony or grand announcements. They arrive hidden inside the ordinary, tucked into the fabric of your daily life. And here is the great mystery: most people fail them, not because the tests are difficult, but because they don't even recognize them as tests at all. Think about it. You've declared your alignment. You've whispered, "I am ready," into the silence. The field listens, but before it floods your life with new patterns, it first checks for coherence. It asks without words, "Do you mean it? Are you living what you've claimed?" And the way it asks is simple. You are given opportunities, small and easily dismissed, to act as the version of yourself you've been calling forth. A friend calls, inviting you into gossip that lowers your energy. Do you join, or do you step out? That is a test. You sit across from a partner who dismisses your truth. Do you shrink, or do you hold steady in your voice? That is a test. You wake up weary, tempted to abandon the new discipline you promised yourself. Do you slip back, or do you follow through? Another test. At first glance, these seem trivial. They don't look like sacred gateways, but they are the places where coherence is built or broken. Because readiness is not proven in the grand moments, it is proven in the micro decisions. The ones no one sees, the ones you could easily excuse. The danger here is the temptation to wait for a big test. People imagine readiness will be challenged by a dramatic crisis, a fork in the road with fire blazing on either side. They wait for the epic moment, missing the subtle invitations that actually determine the signal they broadcast. The universe rarely begins with thunder. It begins with whispers. And if you cannot honor the whispers, how will you ever withstand the storm? Understand this: each small decision is a frequency adjustment. Each moment of integrity sharpens your signal. Each compromise muddies it. When you say no to what drains you, when you choose growth over comfort, when you honor truth over convenience, you become a clearer vessel. And clarity is what the quantum field responds to. But here's the paradox. These tests are not meant to punish. They are mirrors, revealing whether you have truly embodied readiness or merely flirted with it. Fail one, you will meet it again, not as punishment, but as practice. Life repeats lessons until the signal stabilizes. Once it does, the repetition ends not because the field stops testing, but because you no longer need the test. You have become the lesson. Remember the desert of the unknown, the loneliness, the silence, the vacuum. That was preparation for this stage, because in that stripping away, you learned to listen. Now, in the world of action, listening is everything. You will hear the small nudges, not this path, not this habit, not this compromise. Just honor them, and coherence strengthens. Ignore them, and static creeps back in. So if you feel that life has been circling you through the same scenarios, similar partners, similar struggles, Similar frustrations pause. Could it be that you've been facing the same silent test and choosing the old answer? If so, rejoice, for the test is proof that the universe still believes in your readiness. The door remains open, waiting for you to step through with a different response. The truth is simple. Readiness is not a declaration, it is demonstrated. Not once, but continually. It is woven into the fabric of your habits, your choices, your boundaries. And each day offers you countless silent tests, invitations to show yourself and the field who you are becoming. Do not underestimate them. Do not dismiss them. These small decisions are the threads of destiny. And when you weave them with coherence, the tapestry of your new reality cannot help but emerge. The silent tests of readiness sharpen something essential, your awareness. Because once you begin noticing the small invitations and passing them with integrity, you step into a larger realization that you are not just living inside reality. You are observing it into being. And here we touch a cornerstone truth whispered by both mystics and scientists. The observer changes the observed. Physics tells us that particles remain in a haze of probabilities until they are witnessed. They collapse into a measurable state only when attention is applied. Translate this into the language of your life, and it means this possibilities swirl around you endlessly, but they crystallize only when your focus, emotion, and belief converge upon them. You are not just wandering through existence, you are shaping it with every act of perception. This is where most people get caught. They look at their current circumstances with despair. They say, "Look at what's missing. Look at what's broken." They believe their observation is neutral, but it is not. By focusing on lack, they collapse timelines into more lack. By attending to limitation, they conjure more limitation. Their focus is a frequency, and the field answers with coherence. The opposite is also true. When you begin to place your awareness on possibility, when you feel into the versions of yourself already thriving, when you align your emotions with what is being born rather than what is absent, you collapse a different timeline. You become the observer who calls abundance, love, clarity, or courage into form. And this isn't wishful thinking. It's responsibility, because to recognize yourself as the observer is to admit that attention is not free. Every thought you dwell on, every emotion you feed, every story you repeat, these are investments into which reality you will call forward. Your awareness is the most valuable currency you possess, and it never sits idle. It is always collapsing one probability or another. Imagine for a moment all the parallel versions of you waiting. The you who stepped boldly into purpose, the you who healed, the you who built something enduring. Each exists, shimmering in potential. None are fantasy. They are probabilities waiting for observation, waiting for you to tune your focus long enough, steady enough, for one of them to solidify. But here lies the subtlety. Observation is not just glancing. It is coherence, a scattered mind, a divided heart, a fearful body. These collapse nothing but static. True observation is unified signal, thought, feeling, and action aligned, pointing like a laser into the field. That is when probability becomes reality. And so, you must ask, what are you observing most? Are you feeding timelines of fear, repeating the evidence of past pain, collapsing waveforms of doubt into form, or are you sustaining the vision of your becoming long enough for the field to respond? Every silent test you face is a chance to practice this observer effect. When you choose integrity over habit, you are observing the timeline where you are strong. When you align with trust instead of fear, you are collapsing the probability of abundance. When you embody your truth rather than merely recite it, you are tuning your awareness toward coherence. This is the creative power hidden in plain sight. You don't need to fight the field or beg the universe for scraps. You are the one holding the lens, and the lens magnifies whatever you choose to see. The quantum field does not ask for perfection, it asks for steadiness. Can you keep your awareness on the timeline you want, even when the external world has not yet reflected it? Can you collapse possibility into reality through the persistence of your focus? That is the true observer's role. That is how you become the sculptor of your own timeline. The observer effect awakens your personal power, but there is another revelation waiting. Your signal does not exist in isolation. Just as tuning forks resonate together, human beings amplify or distort each other's frequencies. This is why community matters more than most people ever realize. You are not a lone signal in the void. You are part of an interconnected resonance field. Think back to times when you've left a gathering feeling drained, as though your energy had been siphoned away. That wasn't your imagination. Your signal was pulled into incoherence by a group field broadcasting fear, complaint, or stagnation. Contrast that with moments spent with people who uplifted you, how suddenly your ideas flowed, how laughter seemed effortless, how possibilities expanded. That was resonance at work, your field syncing with others in harmony. This principle has been observed in science as well. Metronomes placed on a shared surface eventually sync in rhythm. Fireflies flash in unison when gathered in clusters. Hearts in close proximity can entrain to a shared beat. Humans, too, cannot escape this law of coherence. You attune, whether consciously or not, to the fields around you. This is both a gift and a warning. The gift is that when you align with others who are consciously choosing growth, the amplification is exponential. A group of people holding readiness, trust, and vision together creates a coherence far stronger than any individual alone. This is why shared meditation, collective intention, or even simple conversations with aligned friends can spark breakthroughs that seemed unreachable in solitude. The warning, however, is clear. When you linger in communities defined by fear, resentment, or perpetual complaining, your signal dulls. You begin to doubt yourself. You unconsciously match the vibration of the group, dimming your readiness in order to belong. Many abandon their evolution here, not because they lacked courage, but because they underestimated the gravitational pull of incoherent fields. So the question becomes, who are you aligning with? Who is reinforcing your readiness? And who is undermining it? This doesn't mean severing ties cruelly or judging those who are not yet awake. It means discerning where your energy thrives and where it withers. You are not only responsible for the signals you broadcast, but also for the fields you choose to immerse yourself in. And here is the beauty: when you stand firm in coherence, you become a lighthouse in any room. Your signal steadies others. People may resist at first, but many will feel a subtle relief in your presence, as though something inside them recognizes a frequency they had forgotten. You don't need to persuade. Your field speaks louder than words. Imagine a world where circles of coherence multiplied groups, gathering not to gossip or complain, but to hold steady the vision of possibility. This is how cultural shifts are born, not from one isolated observer, but from networks of resonance aligning. Every great movement, every leap in human consciousness began with small groups amplifying each other's signals until they rippled outward. So take inventory of your resonance fields. Ask yourself, where am I strengthened and where am I diminished? Which communities amplify my readiness and which tempt me back into delay? The answers will reveal themselves quickly if you're willing to listen. Because readiness is contagious. Trust is contagious. Clarity is contagious. And the more you align with those who live in coherence, the more natural it becomes to sustain your own. The field magnifies what is present within it, and together we can hold signals strong enough to shift not just individual timelines, but the very fabric of collective reality. From the strength of community, another revelation arises: no amount of alignment, no number of affirmations, no circle of resonance can replace the final step: trust. Because the quantum field, responsive as it is, does not bow to force. It bends to coherence. And coherence is only complete when you release control. For most of us, this is the hardest threshold. We have been taught since childhood that struggle proves worth, that effort guarantees reward, that only through control can we ensure safety. And so we grip, tighten, calculate, rehearse. We demand results. We check for signs. We live with clenched fists, trying to bend the world to our will. But the field interprets this differently. To it, control is static. Force is interference. A desperate signal broadcasts not trust, but lack. Trust, by contrast, is a frequency of surrender, not the surrender of defeat, but the surrender of alignment. It says, I have tuned my signal. I have acted with integrity. I have walked through the desert and embodied my becoming. Now I allow. In that allowing, the field responds more swiftly than any force could manage. Because what you chase flees, but what you trust flows. Imagine water pressing through a canyon. The stone does not demand how, when, or where. It yields, and the water carves pathways unthinkable to the rigid mind. Trust is this yielding. It does not abandon intention. It completes it. You may recall times when the greatest gifts in your life arrived not through pushing, but through letting go. The job offer that came when you stopped searching desperately. The friendship that formed when you weren't trying to impress. The idea that arrived in the shower, not at the desk. These were not accidents. They were the fruits of trust. Moments where your signal was coherent enough that you no longer needed to grip it into existence. But here's the paradox. Trust often feels like giving up. The ego screams, if I stop controlling, everything will fall apart. And yet surrender is not the white flag of defeat. It is the unlocking of flow. It is the act of stepping aside so that the field can respond in ways far greater than your limited plans could ever design. This is not easy. There will be days when fear returns, when the old patterns tug at you, when you are tempted to force. But trust is not a one-time act. It is a practice. Each time you notice your grip tightening, each time you catch yourself demanding proof, you can breathe, release, and return. And in returning, you become stronger. Trust is the highest signal because it carries no static. It does not argue with the field, it aligns with it. And when you live in this trust, your life shifts from effort to flow, from chasing to attracting, from noise to music. The field is no longer something you plead with, it becomes the mirror reflecting your coherence back to you. So here, at the close of this journey, the invitation is simple. Dare to trust. Trust the timing, trust the unfolding, trust the signal you've already set in motion. You do not need to micromanage reality. You need only to sustain coherence and let the current carry you. Because readiness ends not in control, but in surrender, not in gripping, but in opening. And the moment you return to trust, the universe rushes to meet you not with hesitation, but with the inevitability of resonance finally answered. Trust is where we leave off, and trust is where everything begins again. You've walked through wanting, into readiness, across the desert of silence, through the daily tests and the deeper revelations of observation and resonance. And now you stand here, not as the same self who first pressed play, but as one who has glimpsed their own power quiet, steady, undeniable. Take a breath and notice. This is not theory anymore. It is not a story about someone else. It is the unfolding of you. Every delay you've endured, every cycle you've repeated, every desert you've crossed has brought you to this edge. And the edge is no longer frightening, because you see it for what it is, a threshold. The journey ahead does not require perfection. It does not demand that you never falter, never forget, never fall back into noise. It asks only this, that when you stumble, you return. Return to coherence, return to embodiment, return to trust, over and over, gently, consistently, like a musician tuning an instrument before each performance. This is how you live as signal rather than static. And though this path can feel solitary, remember, you are not alone. Every choice you make sends ripples into the field, weaving with the signals of others who are also waking, also daring to trust. The resonance you build in yourself strengthens the collective, just as their coherence steadies you. We rise in resonance together. So if your heart feels heavy, let trust be lighter than effort. If your mind feels scattered, let coherence be steadier than doubt. And if your soul feels weary, let readiness remind you that you have already survived the desert. Once you can cross it again if needed. In the end, readiness is not about waiting for the perfect moment. It is about deciding that this moment, fragile and imperfect as it seems, is already enough. And when you claim that, when you say with full breath, "I am ready," the field does not hesitate. It responds. So walk gently from here, with a steady pulse of trust in your chest. Not racing, not forcing, not desperate, simply aligned, simply open, simply willing to be the observer who chooses coherence again and again. The universe has been waiting for your signal, and now, with clarity in your voice and readiness in your bones, the path is open.